People think justice fails with a scream. Most days it fails with a laugh, the kind that tells a tired person their pain is worth less than somebody else's comfort. The day the governor's wife laughed at me in open court, I learned again how fast pride can turn into handcuffs. Come sit with me for this one. I mean that from the heart. In 28 years on the bench, only a few cases ever made me go home and stare at my dark kitchen window long after midnight. This one did. If you stay with me, I will tell you why I never forgot the sound of that laugh. It was Thursday, 22nd January 2026, and I got to Langford Municipal Court at 112 East Mercer Street in Belhaven by 6:18 in the morning. Rain had come in during the night and left the courthouse steps slick and silver. I always wake at 4:45, no matter the season. I make my coffee black, stand at the sink, and let the day come to me before the world starts reaching for pieces of it. My father, who practiced law for 42 years, taught me that if a judge comes in rushed, everybody in the room pays for it. The side entrance smelled like wet wool, old paper, and radiator heat trying its best. My clerk, Lila Hensley, already had the docket stacked in neat piles. She looked over her glasses and said, "Morning, Judge. Case 25 MC 7714 got moved to first contested trial. Press has called twice. The gallery list doubled after sunrise." I set my umbrella near the wall and asked her what else she knew. She said, "Only this. The defendant's people have been trying to reach Chambers since yesterday, and Ms. Vega is already downstairs." That was the moment I knew the day would not pass quietly. I have heard thousands of cases in my courtroom. Noise complaints, shoplifting, broken tail lights, bar fights that started with whiskey and ended with stitches. On paper, the case waiting for me that morning looked like a traffic matter with an ugly attitude attached to it. But my father used to say the smallest file on a docket can carry the biggest truth about a community. If a working woman cannot get fairness over a damaged car and a dangerous lie, then all our grand speeches about equality are just decoration on rotten wood. The file said City of Belhaven versus Celeste Ann Whitmore, age 41, wife of Governor Nathaniel Whitmore. It listed reckless driving, obstruction of emergency access, failure to provide insurance information at the scene, disorderly conduct after officer instruction, and one pending issue tied to contempt warnings from a prior hearing. It looked neat in black print. Real life rarely does. I want to ask you something before I go further. Have you ever watched somebody hold themselves together because falling apart would cost too much? If you have, then you will understand the woman who sat in my courtroom that morning with a plastic folder in her lap and bus fare folded inside it like a prayer. Celeste Whitmore arrived at 8:37 a.m. with 2 lawyers, a public image assistant, and enough perfume to announce her before her shoes did. She wore a winter white Tom Ford suit with clean, sharp lines, an Hermes scarf the color of cream, Balenciaga heels that clicked across the tile like tiny hammers, and a gold Rolex day date that flashed every time she lifted a hand. Her bag was Louis Vuitton. Her hair looked as if a stylist had argued with each strand and won. She did not enter the courtroom the way most people do. She entered it like a room that had been prepared for her. She was active online in the loud, polished way some wealthy people are. Belhaven knew her from videos about charity galas, state dinners, and little soft-voiced speeches about grace, manners, and public service. She had a public Instagram account called A Celeste in Bloom, a polished TikTok page full of holiday tours and life behind service clips, and a habit of posting from places where other people were doing the actual work. That kind of shine can fool a lot of people from a distance. It does not fool a courtroom for long. Marisol Vega came in 3 minutes later through the public doors with her shoulders slightly bent from exhaustion rather than shame. She was 46 years old and had worked 21 years as a night shift medical surgical nurse at St. Agnes Medical Center on Bell Street. She wore a navy dress, a thrift store gray coat still damp at the hem, black flats with softened heels, and a watch with a cracked leather band. She held a clear folder against her chest with both hands. No lawyer, no assistant, no perfume, just a woman trying to keep one more hard week from swallowing the next one. She thanked Bailiff Thomas Green when he moved a chair closer to the aisle because her left knee had been stiff in the cold. She thanked Lila when Lila offered her water. She even thanked the young city attorney, Nia Benton, just for explaining the order of testimony again. Some people perform dignity. Marisol carried it without asking anyone to notice. Her face had the tired grace I have seen in nurses, teachers, bus drivers, and single parents who live inside schedules tighter than most rich people can imagine. She was a widow. Her husband, Daniel Vega, had died in 2017 from a sudden aneurysm at age 41. She lived with her daughter, Lucia Vega, age 17, and her father, Arturo Vega, age 72, in a two-bedroom apartment on South Clay Avenue. Arturo had end-stage kidney disease and needed dialysis every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at Bellhaven Kidney Center at 5:40 in the morning. Marisol's blue 2012 Honda Civic was not just transportation. It was the machine that moved her entire family through life: work, school, medicine, dialysis, groceries, rent money shifts. That car was a spine. I am going to ask something plain here. Stay with me and see whether money can stand in the rain and tell the truth the way ordinary people have to. Cases like this begin with a dent in metal, but they never stay there. They spread into pride, fear, delay, and the terrible ease with which some people decide another human being is beneath apology. The original incident happened on Wednesday, 12th of November, 2025 at 10:47 p.m. outside the East Emergency entrance of St. Agnes Medical Center, 814 Bell Street, Bellhaven. It was a cold rain that night, 38 degrees with a steady wind out of the north. Marisol had just finished a 14-hour shift on 5 West. She walked out carrying a lunch tote, a folded cardigan, and a pharmacy bag with Arturo's blood pressure pills inside. Her Honda sat in the employee curb zone 41 feet from the east doors, legally parked, rear-angled slightly toward the yellow staff bollard. St. Agnes had hosted a donor reception that evening in the East Pavilion. The governor had appeared for less than an hour and left before dessert. His wife stayed longer. According to the staff timeline, Celeste Whitmore exited the pavilion at 10:46 p.m. with 2 Hospital Foundation women, a photographer, and a look on her face that said she was done waiting for weather, rules, and people. The covered ambulance lane ran directly past the East Emergency entrance, and bright red signs every 20 feet said, "Emergency access only." Bellhaven in November gets busy with flu cases, breathing trouble, and slick roads. That lane is sacred ground if you work in emergency medicine. Owen Carlisle, age 31, the valet supervisor on duty, told her driver the Porsche could not be brought into that lane. He would later swear under oath that he said it twice. Celeste took the key fob from him herself and said, "Then step aside." The vehicle was a black 2025 Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT, plate number GW117, registered to Whitmore Family Holdings. She drove it herself around a cone that had been set to protect ambulance clearance. That was her first choice. Marisol was standing at the back of her Honda when she saw the Porsche nose into the lane. She knew the donor event had ended. She knew staff had been told to keep that area clear. She also heard hospital radio traffic through the partly open emergency doors about an inbound pediatric respiratory case. So she did the decent thing. She lifted one hand and said through the rain, "Ma'am, that lane has to stay open. We have a transport coming in." Her voice was calm, not rude, not loud. She was doing what nurses do every day, protecting a need bigger than her own. Celeste rolled down her window a few inches. Security footage later showed her eyes travel over Marisol from shoes to coat to face. Then she laughed. "Then call somebody paid to move cars," she said. Marisol answered, "I am paid to keep people alive. Please back out." The next 2 seconds changed half a year of lives. Celeste swung the wheel right, tried to slide around the cone, misjudged the space, and the front passenger quarter panel of the Porsche struck the left rear of Marisol's Honda with enough force to shove it 18 feet 7 inches into a yellow concrete bollard. Metal screamed, the pharmacy bag split, pill bottles scattered into the rain. If you have ever had your whole month ruined in one ugly sound, then you already know what happened next without me saying it. The body goes still. The mind races ahead. The heart starts counting costs before the tongue can form a word. That is where Marisol stood at 10:47 p.m., soaking wet, staring at the car that carried her father to dialysis and her daughter toward college. For 6 full seconds, Celeste stayed in the Porsche with the engine running. Wipers moved, rain hit the hood. Then she lifted her phone. She pointed it first toward her own face, then toward the damaged Honda, then toward Marisol. That detail felt strange the first time I heard it. It felt monstrous once the rest came in. Marisol stepped toward the driver's side and said, "Please don't leave, I need your insurance." Celeste cracked the door and answered, "You people see a nice car and think payday?" Then she closed the door and rolled forward under the covered east canopy, like the wet, broken scene behind her had become someone else's problem. Owen called 911 at 10:49 p.m. He gave the dispatcher the make, the plate number, the location, and said a driver had struck an employee vehicle while obstructing emergency access. Denise Holloway, the hospital's security director, shouted for staff to clear the lane. Marisol knelt in the rain, gathering Arturo's pill bottles from the pavement and wiping labels with her sleeve so she could still read the dosage. That detail pierced me when I first read it in the report. Her own car had just been crushed, and she was still trying to save medicine because replacing medicine costs money working people do not have sitting around. Officer Dana Rios, badge 417, arrived at 10:56 p.m. Officer Marcus Bell, badge 233, arrived at 10:58 p.m. Rios went to Marisol first and found her shivering, right wrist swelling, knees wet through, still focused on the pills. Bell went to the loading area and found the Porsche with blue paint transfer on the front passenger panel, a damaged plate bracket, and the defendant under the canopy speaking on her phone. When he asked if she had been driving, she said, "I am Celeste Whitmore. You can speak to counsel." That was the second choice that shaped everything afterward. I want to challenge you here. Do not look away just because this started with cars and rain. Stay long enough to see what entitlement sounds like when it thinks a public courthouse will blink. A lot of people can act kind when nothing is at stake. Character shows itself when consequences walk into the room. At the arraignment on Friday, 14th November 2025, Celeste came in 40 minutes late wearing a camel coat over silk and dark sunglasses indoors. She pleaded not guilty to every count and looked annoyed that the process expected her to stand when her name was called. I set bond on personal recognizance with travel notice required, a direct no-contact order as to witnesses, and a warning that public comments about the facts could become evidence. She smiled at that warning in a way I've come to recognize. Some people think rules are there only so they can admire how easily they step around them. The defense began working the edges of the case at once. Reed Talbot, her lead lawyer, filed a motion to dismiss on 21st November, claiming selective prosecution driven by media interest. On 4th December, he brought me a plea agreement with soft language, lower fines, no reckless driving admission, and private restitution pushed off into insurance. He called it practical. Marisol sat in the second row that morning with Lucia beside her and asked if she could address the court. I let her. She stood and said, "If she had said sorry to me that night, I might have accepted a lot, but she looked at me like I was trash in the road." I rejected the plea agreement the same day. The delay hurt Marisol in ways the defense tried hard to keep off the record. Her Honda was declared a total loss on 19th in November, actual cash value $640. Her own insurance only covered liability. Celeste's insurer stalled payment after the defense claimed uncertain operator identification despite plate, witnesses, and body cam. For 13 days, Marisol pieced together rides to work and dialysis, 2 buses and 1 ride share to reach St. Agnes from South Clay. Average round-trip cost, $38.20. She missed 2 hours of work on 18th of November when the Route 6 bus never came. She spent $147.63 replacing Arturo's medication after rain damaged the labels and soaked the boxes. She paid $94 for a wrist brace. The numbers piled up the way they always do for families already living close to the edge. And then there was Lucia's college money. In the glove box of the Honda that night sat an envelope holding $1,900 in cash saved over 16 months for her first semester housing deposit at Belhaven State College. The impact jammed the trunk, warped the glove compartment, and let rain reach everything. Nothing was stolen. That almost made it crueler. Life just got in there and spoiled what had taken patience to build. Lucia later testified that she and her mother dried the bills flat under old cookbooks on the kitchen table and still came up short after paying for medication and transportation. If you are the sort of person who believes quiet people deserve to be heard all the way through, then you and I are already standing on the same ground. Keep going with me. The part that broke this case open had not even entered the courtroom yet. By Thursday, 22nd January 2026, the courthouse hallway felt like a church before a funeral. Not loud, just crowded with expectation. Belhaven had started treating the case like a referendum on whether public money, private influence, and plain old vanity could grind down an ordinary woman without consequence. Lila called the case at 9:02 a.m. City of Belhaven versus Celeste Ann Whitmore, case number 25 MC 7714. The gallery went still. Thomas Green closed the rail with the soft click I have heard 10,000 times. I took my bench and saw the whole distance of America seated before me in one room. Celeste stood only after Talbot touched her elbow. She wore that same winter white suit, the Rolex, the Louis Vuitton bag by her chair, and a look of controlled boredom that said she expected this to be inconvenient but temporary. Marisol sat opposite in her navy dress with her plastic folder, wrist brace hidden under her sleeve, and a bus transfer folded inside the file like a receipt from a life nobody wealthy ever wants to imagine. 10 feet separated them, 10 feet and a canyon. Nia Benton opened for the city without flourish. She said the case was about choices made over 3 minutes and contempt shown over 2 months. A choice to enter a marked emergency lane, a choice to ignore a hospital employee warning, a choice to strike a parked car rather than stop and wait, a choice to insult the person harmed, a choice to resist police instruction. And finally, she said, a choice to protect image over truth when accountability came close. Talbot objected to the word image. I overruled him. He opened by calling the whole matter a parking misunderstanding, inflated by publicity and resentment toward privilege. He said Marisol was sympathetic but mistaken. He said the officers had been eager to make an example of a public figure. Then, looking directly at me with a smooth expression that did not fool me for a second, he said he trusted the court would not join the theater around this file. Lawyers have been insulting judges politely since courts were invented. It lands about the same every time. The city called Officer Dana Rios first. She testified cleanly with the kind of steady care good officers bring when they know every word might later be challenged. She described finding Marisol on the ground gathering medication and asking immediately that the report note her father needed the car for dialysis. She described the rain, the position of the Honda, and Marisol's identification of the Porsche by plate before she ever approached the defendant. On cross, Talbot asked if rain could have blurred Marisol's memory. Rios answered, "Rain does not blur a license plate already given to dispatch." The gallery shifted. Celeste looked irritated. Officer Marcus Bell followed. He described the damage in practical terms: blue paint transfer on the Porsche, black scrape and red lens fragments on the Honda, displaced cone, wet tire arc, front plate bracket hanging by one screw. He explained chain of custody for the scene photos, body cam, and dash evidence in such simple language that even a child could have followed it. When Benton played the clip of Bell asking for license and Celeste responding, "Do you know whose evening you are interrupting?" the whole courtroom tightened. Not because the words were explosive, because the tone was. I want to thank you for staying in this story right here, because this is the point where a lot of people would decide they already know enough. They never do. The ugliest truth in a case rarely walks in first. It waits until people settle into a neat opinion, and then it opens the door. Owen Carlisle took the stand next. He was thin, nervous, red-haired, and gripping the rail too hard at first. I told him to breathe and take his time. He did. He said he had warned the driver twice that the lane was for ambulances only. He said Celeste took the key fob from his hand and told him, "Then step aside." He said that after the impact, when Marisol asked for insurance, Celeste said, "You people see a nice car and think payday." Talbot attacked him hard, suggested he was inventing details to protect his job. Owen swallowed and answered, "I had one job that night, keep the lane open. She made that impossible." Then came Denise Holloway, director of security at St. Agnes, age 52, dark green suit, steel in her spine. She confirmed the lane restrictions, the donor exit plan, the cone placement, and the timeline. She confirmed that at 8:13 a.m. on 13th November, she received a call from Randall Pierce, deputy director of the governor's public engagement office, saying Mrs. Whitmore was upset and hoped everyone could keep charity in focus instead of parking confusion. Denise documented the call at 8:21 a.m. in her incident log. At 11:16 a.m., while preserving footage, she discovered camera segment E4 from 10:44 p.m. to 10:55 p.m. showed a server access error. That segment was later restored from mirrored backup. Talbot objected to any hint of outside pressure. I allowed the testimony for the limited purpose of witness pressure and preservation issues. Denise did not dramatize a thing. She just read the times, the notes, the logs, and the follow-up email she sent to hospital counsel at 9:04 a.m. Talbot asked if she disliked the governor. She said, "I do not work for the governor." He asked if she understood the reputational harm to St. Agnes. She said, "I understand the harm of a blocked emergency lane." That answer landed with the kind of weight only a calm witness can create. Then Marisol took the stand. She moved slowly because of her knee. She sat upright and never once looked at Celeste. Benton asked about her job, her family, the Honda, and what happened after the impact. Marisol said, "I heard the pill bottles first. That is what I remember. They rolled under the wheel, and all I could think was my father cannot miss his morning dose." She described asking for insurance and being told she looked like someone chasing money. When Benton asked how that felt, Marisol answered in a voice so quiet the courtroom had to lean toward her. "I have cleaned blood off my shoes at 3 a.m. and still gone home to cook oatmeal for my father before sleeping 2 hours. Nobody has ever made me feel smaller than she did." Talbot cross-examined her with polished cruelty. Was she tired after a 14-hour shift? Yes. Did tired people sometimes mishear? Sometimes. Did she dislike wealthy donors? Marisol finally looked at him and said, "Sir, I do not have time to dislike rich people. I have work." There are lines that no scriptwriter could improve because life writes them best. That was one. I want to hold up a mirror for 1 second. Think about the last time somebody made you feel small simply because they believed their time mattered more than yours. Did it stay with you longer than the actual loss did? In my experience, disrespect is often the bruise people carry longest. After lunch, Nia Benton brought in the paper trail, bus receipts, rideshare statements, urgent care records, payroll logs showing missed hours, the total loss estimate from Boone Automotive, photos of the Honda, photos of the soaked medication boxes, and one kitchen table picture that bothered the defense greatly. Lucia's housing deposit money drying flat beneath cookbooks on a chipped laminate table. Talbot called the photo emotional. I admitted it anyway. Justice is allowed to look at what damage means in a real home. Lucia Vega testified after that. 17 years old, borrowed cardigan, 2 silver hoops, school notebook tucked under one arm because she had come from class. She told the court she and her mother counted the drawing bills at 1:12 a.m. on 13 November because she had a chemistry quiz the next morning and kept watching the microwave clock. She said, "My mom kept telling me school can wait 1 semester if it has to. She said Grandpa comes first." Then she added, "She always says other people come first." That is who she is. Talbot did not cross her much. He knew better. Then he made the mistake that changed the whole trial. He called Celeste Whitmore to the stand. Some defendants think their face, voice, and money can do the work evidence should do. Celeste took the oath in a cream blouse and pearl earrings, one ankle crossed neatly over the other. She admitted driving the Porsche. She admitted moving around the cone. She denied hearing Marisol clearly. She denied trying to leave the scene. She denied saying the exact payday insult, though she conceded she may have remarked that false claims happen around luxury vehicles. The truth is sometimes too proud to hide itself fully. Benton asked about her phone use after the crash. Celeste said she contacted counsel and a family aide. Benton asked if she recorded any video near the lane. Celeste said no. Benton asked if she posted anything online that night. Talbot objected so fast his pen fell. Benton said she had good faith foundation. I told her to lay it. Celeste stiffened. I post all the time, she said. That does not make every bad evening a crime. She still thought the danger was public embarrassment. She did not yet understand that her own phone had become the cleanest witness in the room. If your curiosity is pulling at you now, hold on to it. The most damaging piece was only seconds away, and when it entered the record, the whole room changed shape. Some evidence does not just prove a fact, it reveals a soul. The city called Sergeant Leah Corbin of the Bellhaven Digital Evidence Unit. No drama in her voice, no flourish, just dates, systems, and chain of custody. She testified that on 16th of January 2026, the city received archived social media content from Celeste Whitmore's public Instagram account and linked story cache through lawful preservation, response, and cross-matched extraction. Download time 2:23 p.m., hash verified, stored on the city evidence server, no gaps. She explained it so clearly there was nowhere for confusion to hide. Then she gave the timestamp, Wednesday, 12th November 2025, 10:52 p.m. 5 minutes after the crash, 3 minutes before Officer Rios arrived. Public Instagram story from a Celeste in Bloom, cross-posted to linked Snapchat story. Duration, 11 seconds. Geotag, St. Agnes East Pavilion. Caption in white script over the video. Bellhaven's finest begging season came early. And below that, with a laughing emoji, girl almost threw herself in front of my Porsche for a payday. There are silences a room earns. The silence that followed was one of them. Benton played the clip without sound. Rain, the black hood of the Porsche. Marisol on one knee in the lane gathering pill bottles from the pavement. The camera lingered on her too long to claim accident. Then it flipped to Celeste's face under the canopy, smiling the smile of a woman who thought humiliation was funny if it happened downward. Even without audio, the content was enough. Time, image, caption, and context joined hands so neatly there was no space left between them. Talbot objected to authenticity, prejudice, and foundation. I overruled him one by one. Celeste had just testified she posted often and deleted content after midnight. Corbin had the archive, the metadata, and the chain. Benton asked Celeste if she still denied recording in the lane. Celeste's jaw tightened. I do not remember every story from 2 months ago, she said. Benton answered, most people remember the ones where they mock a nurse in the rain. The words were sharp, but they were earned. Then came the viewer interactions preserved with the story. At 10:53 p.m., a reply from a Randy Pierce official read, delete now, Bellhaven PD on site. At 10:54 p.m., a reply from Cedo Witt Private, a linked private account tied to the same recovery email, read, already screen recorded. She looks ridiculous. That second message did more than wound. It exposed intent. This was not a frightened woman venting. It was a cruel woman performing cruelty while evidence still steamed in the rain. Celeste finally snapped a little. This is absurd, she said. People joke, people vent. Benton asked, about a nurse whose car you just struck while blocking an ambulance lane? Talbot objected. I overruled him. The gallery did not murmur. That was the strange part. It was too ugly for murmuring. Even Lila stopped typing for a second. Thomas Green shifted one foot and went still again. I want to build something with you here, because stories like this are not just about one room. They are about what kind of people we decide to be together. If you are still listening, then you are one of the people who believes dignity matters even when the person harmed has no platform, no title, and no expensive lawyer. That matters to me more than you know. Marisol asked for no break. I offered one anyway. She said, no, Your Honor, I would rather hear all of it now. That answer told me everything about how she had lived. Get through it. Stand still. Let the truth finish speaking. Benton rested Sergeant Corbin for the moment and called one more witness before the afternoon recess. The side door opened just then, and Lila looked back at me with that alert face clerks get when a case is about to grow teeth. The witness was Dr. Helen Sato, Chief of Emergency Operations at St. Agnes Medical Center. She had landed in Bellhaven that morning after flying back from Denver because restored dispatch data had changed the harm analysis. Talbot objected to late testimony. Benton said the records were confirmed at 7:41 that morning and went directly to emergency access danger. I allowed it. Dr. Sato took the stand at 3:14 p.m. in a dark coat over hospital scrubs, credentials clipped at the waist, no nonsense in her voice. She testified that at 10:48 p.m. on 12th of November, an ambulance carrying 5-year-old Isaiah Mercer was inbound from Route 7 with acute respiratory failure after smoke exposure from a house fire. The normal east receiving line should have been clear. Instead, because of the displaced cone, staff movement around the collision, and the Porsche positioned under the covered lane, the ambulance had to alter approach and lost 2 minutes and 19 seconds in transfer sequence. Dr. Sato said it plainly. The child survived, but airways do not give back time because someone powerful wanted a dry curb. That sentence changed the emotional weather in my courtroom. Up to that point, the case had been about property, insult, and privilege. Suddenly, it also held a child's breath inside it. Nobody had known the full shape of that delay, not even Marisol. She closed her eyes for a second and opened them again. Celeste stared at the table. Talbot's face went a shade paler. The gallery felt like one living creature pulling in air. Dr. Sato also confirmed a conference call the next morning with hospital counsel, board chair Michael Danner, and Randall Pierce from the governor's orbit. Her notes recorded Pierce saying, "No one wants a donor misunderstanding turned into a life or death headline." Dr. Sato said she answered, "If a child's airway is involved, no one gets to call it a misunderstanding." She did not sound proud when she said it in my courtroom. She sounded tired, which made it hit harder. I need to ask you this straight. Do you still believe real justice is possible when power leans on doors, phones, and friendships behind the scenes? I do, but not because it comes easily. I believe it because every once in a while, ordinary people stand still long enough for the truth to catch up with money. Benton recalled Sergeant Corbin for one final item. A text recovered from deleted device cache and matched to server records sent from Celeste Whitmore's phone at 11:21 p.m. on 12th of November to Randall Pierce. Exact words, "Get hospital footage cleaned before morning. She's milking this." Talbot shot to his feet and asked for a mistrial, a continuance, suppression, anything that might pull the floor back under his client. I denied the mistrial, granted a brief recess so counsel could confer, and told the court we would resume in 10 minutes. When we returned, the air was heavier. Talbot leaned close to Celeste, voice low and urgent, trying to keep her still. Benton asked whether she had sent the text. Celeste said, "Everyone here is pretending to be stupid. Cleaned means clarified." Benton asked whether she referred to Marisol Vega. Celeste laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not an embarrassed laugh, the same bored, dismissive little laugh some people use when they think the room exists only to annoy them. I told her, "Mrs. Whitmore, control yourself." She lifted her chin and said, "With respect, Judge, this little court is acting like I robbed a bank." I said, "One more outburst and you will be held in contempt." She laughed again, looked toward Marisol, then back at me and said, "This room feeds on people like me so people like her can feel important, and people like you can pretend this place means something." She pointed when she said her. She pointed when she said you. The sound that rose from the gallery was not loud, it was worse. It was the sharp intake of 100 held breaths breaking at once. Thomas Green took one step forward. Lila's face turned white. Talbot said, "Mrs. Whitmore, stop." She did not. I looked at the clock on the wall. 3:47:11 p.m. "Mrs. Whitmore," I said, "you are in direct criminal contempt of this court. Sit down." She remained standing. "Bailiff, take her into custody." Thomas Green moved fast and clean. She said, "You cannot be serious." The cuffs closed at 3:47:56 p.m., 45 seconds from the laugh to the handcuffs. The courtroom became all sound and no motion, the old heater humming, a leather chair giving a small squeak, the hard little click of metal closing on both wrists. Celeste's face emptied out in stages, first annoyance, then disbelief, then real fear. Talbot kept saying, "Your Honor, please let me be heard." I answered, "You will be heard after this courtroom has order." Nobody in the gallery moved. People were afraid even to blink too loudly, as if the truth might crack under any sudden sound. I am going to confess something to you here. Even after 28 years, using the full force of my authority still shakes me. It should. A judge who stops feeling the weight of that power has grown dangerous. Have you ever done the right thing while knowing half the town would say you went too far and the other half would say you did not go far enough? That narrow place is where honest judging lives. I remanded Celeste to the holding room pending immediate contempt findings and set a custody review for the next morning at 8:30 a.m. I also ordered the record preserved in full and directed copies of the newly surfaced preservation issues to the county prosecutor. Talbot argued that laughter was not contempt. I told him truthfully that laughter alone is not. Direct defiance after warning is. Pointing at a witness in the bench while insulting the court's legitimacy after express instruction to stop is. He knew the law. He simply did not like meeting it. Then the side door opened again. Lila handed me a card from Eleanor Pike, Inspector General for the State Office of Public Integrity. She was not there for theater. She carried a sealed statement and requested a scheduling note on a pending state review. I permitted her presence for that limited purpose. She stood, spoke 12 calm words, and changed the stakes of the case once more. Your Honor, the preservation failure now appears tied to outside interference. That was all. No names in open court, no speech, just one hard sentence. Everyone understood it anyway. This was no longer only about a wealthy woman striking a nurse's car and mocking her online. It touched evidence, public trust, and the quiet machinery powerful people sometimes try to use when they think a problem should disappear before breakfast. Nobody in that room could pretend the case was small anymore. Not after the child in the ambulance, not after the deleted story, not after the text, not after the laugh. I asked you earlier not to look away. Now I need something even more specific. Stop whatever else is moving in your mind and listen closely to what comes next, because the difference between revenge and justice lives here. One burns hot and quick. The other takes patience, memory, and a willingness to make punishment fit the harm rather than the anger. The next morning, Friday, 23rd January 2026, sleet clung to the courthouse rails and 4 news trucks lined Mercer Street. I was in chambers by 6:11 a.m. with black coffee, a legal pad, and the full transcript from the day before spread across my desk. My father's voice was with me the whole morning. Never sentence from anger, he used to say, and never mistake polished cruelty for innocence. I read every line twice. I marked the warnings I had given. I marked the exact words she used. I marked the way Marisol had answered every question with restraint instead of performance. At the custody review, Celeste came in wearing county khaki over a thermal shirt, her hair pulled back with a plain band. No scarf, no Rolex, no Louis Vuitton bag. Wealth can vanish from a body in less than 24 hours when a person is required to stand where everyone else stands. But the law does not permit me to take pleasure in that. She still had rights. She still had counsel. Talbot argued for immediate release on contempt, called it stress, called it public pressure, called it a heat-of-the-moment reaction. Benton opposed release based on the no-contact order, the deleted content, the recovered text, and the attempt to influence preservation. I asked Celeste if she understood the seriousness of trying to bend witnesses and records. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes and said, I understand that everyone wants me on my knees for a story. There it was again. Not remorse, not recognition, self-pity dressed as insight. I kept her in custody through the close of evidence and set sentencing for Thursday, 19th of February, 2026, to allow the county prosecutor time to separate whatever state review belonged outside my municipal file. A judge's first duty in a heated case is to know exactly what is hers and what is not. When sentencing day came, the atmosphere had changed. The crowd was still there, but quieter now. People were not hungry for spectacle anymore. They wanted to know whether the court would finish what it had started. Marisol wore the same navy dress and no wrist brace this time. Celeste wore charcoal gray, simpler than before, but still with the posture of a woman struggling to understand why the world had stopped making room for her. Lila called the case. Thomas Green closed the rail. I looked at every face in the room before we began. It matters, that looking. My father taught me that too. If you're going to change a life, you ought to see it clearly first. I allowed a victim impact statement. Marisol rose and placed both hands on the podium as if steadying something fragile between them. She said, Your Honor, I do not want her ruined. I want her to understand that some of us cannot buy back one lost week. Then she read the numbers from a folded page because, as she put it, rich people always act like poor people are vague. Bus fare $62, ride shares 496 to 60, medication replacement 147.63, urgent care embrace 188 hours, lost wages 1,126.40, college housing deferral fee $350 towing and storage $429.50, replacement down payment on a used 2018 Toyota Corolla after insurance delays $4,800. Then she said something I still think about. My father missed a treatment start by 26 minutes the day after the crash because our ride fell through. My daughter delayed school. I kept going to work because patients still needed their meds on time. I just wanted the truth to count as much as her last name. No tears, no shaking, just truth, placed carefully on the record like dishes after a hard meal. That kind of restraint can humble a whole room. I asked Celeste if she wished to speak. Talbot advised yes. She stood, smoothed her sleeve, and began with the sentence I knew was coming even before it left her mouth. I regret how this has unfolded. Not what I did, not what I said, how this has unfolded. She called the crash a parking confusion. She said she never intended for any nurse or family to suffer. She used the word suffer the way some people use weather, as if pain had drifted in from nowhere and settled on the wrong house by mistake. That was when I knew exactly what the sentence had to do. My father once told me rules without heart become weapons, but heart without rules becomes permission for the strong to hunt the weak. That sentence has sat inside me for years. In court, mercy and consequence are always standing too close together. If you lean the wrong way, justice falls. I thought about that while Celeste sat back down. I thought about Isaiah Mercer fighting for breath in an ambulance. I thought about wet pill bottles rolling under a car. I thought about a teenager flattening money under cookbooks. I thought about a laugh inside my courtroom. If you have a friend who still thinks fairness is old-fashioned or useless or too weak for this world, send this story to that person when you can, not to win an argument, to remind them that fairness is one of the few things standing between ordinary people and the appetites of the powerful. Then I spoke. I said the court had considered every admitted exhibit, every word of sworn testimony, the defendant's conduct before and during trial, the documented financial harm to Marisol Vega, the emergency access risk proved by Dr. Sato, and the contempt committed directly in my presence. I found Celeste Whitmore guilty on reckless driving, unlawful obstruction of emergency access, failure to provide insurance information promptly at the scene, and direct criminal contempt of court. I stated for the record that separate preservation issues had been referred to the county prosecutor and the State Office of Public Integrity and were not being sentenced by me that day. Then I told her what the case really was. Mrs. Whitmore, the law did not bring you here because you are famous. It brought you here because on 12th November 2025, you decided your comfort outranked duty, your image outranked honesty, and another woman's time, labor, and dignity could be bent around your convenience. This court does not punish status. It punishes choices. Nobody moved. Even the heating vents seemed to wait. For contempt, I sentenced her to 30 days in the Belhaven County Detention Center with 10 days to serve and 20 suspended on strict compliance. On the municipal counts, I imposed 12 months supervised probation, a 1-year driver's license suspension subject to normal statutory review, and 320 hours of community service through the County Medical Transport and Dialysis Access Program. Not a gala, not a public ribbon cutting. Not some smiling photo at a donation table. 4-hour shifts on Saturday mornings and weekday transport desk assignments until every hour was complete. No cameras, no social posting, no branding. Service, not performance. I ordered restitution to Marisol Vega in the amount of $8,613 within 30 days for documented losses beyond partial insurance payment and an additional $5,000 contribution to the Belhaven Emergency Access Safety Fund, because when a person turns a public ambulance lane into a private convenience, the whole public bears the danger. I entered a no-contact order protecting Marisol, Lucia, Arturo, Owen Carlisle, Denise Holloway, Dr. Sato, and any St. Agnes staff member who testified or preserved evidence. Then I said the line people later repeated back to me in grocery stores and letters and school essays: if you can afford every luxury except humility, Then humility becomes the debt this court will collect. Celeste's face changed on that line, not because of the money. Money had insulated her life from most consequences. It was the time, the control, the service, the license suspension, the fact that she would have to stand in the cold morning with the very people her choices had harmed and serve without an audience. That is what reached her. Her shoulders dropped half an inch. In my line of work, half an inch can be an earthquake. Talbot asked for a stay pending appeal. I granted the narrow stay allowed on certain municipal penalties after bond, but not on the contempt days already ordered to serve. He knew that was the lawful line. As deputies prepared to move Celeste, I heard her hiss to him, "You said this would not happen." He answered, too tired to hide the truth anymore, "I said you needed to stop talking." The gallery did not laugh. The moment was too human for that, too grim. Pride had finally run out of places to stand. I need to be honest with you before I tell the last courtroom moment. There was a part of me that still wanted to know whether remorse would come once the sentence landed. Real remorse, I mean, not public regret, not discomfort, not humiliation at being seen. I watched Celeste's face closely as Thomas Green stepped near her chair. What I saw was not remorse yet, but it was no longer certainty. Sometimes the first real crack in a person is simply the death of certainty. When the room began to clear, Marisol stayed behind to sign the restitution schedule with Lila. The gallery filtered out in whispers. Dr. Sato gave a small nod to Marisol on her way past. Owen Carlyle paused by the back row and rubbed both hands over his face like a man who had been holding too much tension for too many months. Thomas Green stood at attention beside the rail until the deputies had taken Celeste through the side door. Then even he let out a small breath. I stepped down from the bench because the formal work was over. Judges are not supposed to become part of the story, and I still believe that. But there are times when a human word belongs after the legal one. Marisol turned when she heard me near. Up close, she looked both older and younger than 46, which is what long duty does to a person. She said, "Thank you for hearing the whole thing." Not for ruling her way, for hearing it. That difference meant everything. I told her, "You brought the whole thing with you. Most people bring only the wound. You brought the facts." She gave me a tired smile and said, "My father says courts are the only places where poor people still have to dress up to ask not to be stepped on." I felt that sentence settle right into me. "Your father is not entirely wrong," I said. Then she opened her plastic folder and showed me a photo of Lucia in volunteer scrubs beside Arturo in his dialysis cap. "She still wants nursing," Marisol said, "even after all this." I looked at that picture and thought how stubborn goodness can be. If this story has carried you this far, I want to ask you something personal. Have you ever had one case, one argument, one hard day, or one unfair moment stay with you for years because it showed you who people really were? I have. This was one of mine. Life in a municipal court does not pause for one famous case. March brought me broken probation calendars, barking dog disputes, and a brother who threatened another brother over a leaf blower. April brought noise complaints and 3 young men who thought street racing at 2 a.m. was a sign of manhood. But this case kept sending ripples long after the gavel came down. That is how you know a day mattered. It keeps moving through places you cannot see. On Tuesday, 9th of June 2026, Lila brought me a cream envelope with Bellhaven Kidney Center in the corner. Inside was a thank you card from Marisol and a photograph. She wrote that restitution had arrived in full on 18th of March. She wrote that Lucia had started summer classes at Bellhaven State on 1st June after all, only 1 semester later than planned. She wrote that Arturo had not missed a dialysis chair in 10 straight weeks because the county transport office, after attention from the case, added 4 early morning rides for families in South Clay. On the back of the photo, she wrote, "Still moving. That was the whole point." The photo showed a silver 2018 Toyota Corolla parked in front of their apartment building in clear sun. Arturo stood beside it with one hand on the roof as if greeting something reliable. Lucia held a stack of nursing class papers and smiled like a person learning hope is allowed back in. Marisol stood between them in scrubs, one hand on each of their shoulders. No pose, no performance, just relief. That picture sat on my desk for 3 weeks before I put it in the file. The case changed St. Agnes, too. By April, the East Emergency Lane had new steel bollards, brighter paint, and a revised access policy that banned donor vehicles from the corridor without written emergency approval. Dr. Sato and Denise Holloway pushed through an employee emergency transit fund after staff raised concerns about transportation loss and delayed care duties. The hospital never named Marisol publicly in that policy memo. They did not need to. The truth had already done its work. The governor's office tried to move on with careful statements about private disappointment and personal responsibility. Sponsors quietly dropped Celeste from a state wellness campaign. Randall Pierce resigned on 2 March 2026 after the State Office of Public Integrity confirmed it was reviewing contact between public staff and hospital evidence preservation. I never told myself my courtroom fixed the world. Courts are not magic, but they can open a locked room and force light into it, and sometimes that is enough to change how institutions behave. On Saturday, 18 July 2026, I was leaving the farmer's market on Grant Square with peaches and tomatoes when I saw the county medical transport booth set up near the fountain. Volunteers were helping seniors confirm dialysis pickup times. One woman wore a plain gray county polo, no scarf, no watch, hair tied back, clipboard in hand, Celeste Whitmore. I stopped under the shade of a sycamore and watched for maybe 20 seconds. A man in a veteran cap asked her to repeat his pickup time. She did, slowly and politely. Then a woman with a folded walker struggled at the curb, and Celeste stepped forward without being asked and took the heavier side. I do not tell you that because one decent afternoon erases cruelty. It does not. A summer of court-ordered service does not undo a mocked nurse, a blocked ambulance lane, a child delayed in respiratory distress, or a laugh aimed at justice itself. But I tell you because consequence has more than one job. One job is to mark the harm. Another is to force a person to stand close enough to ordinary need that they can no longer pretend it is beneath them. Whether that lesson lasts, only time knows. There is one more thing. In late August, I received a short note from Dr. Helen Sato. She wrote that Isaiah Mercer, the little boy whose ambulance had been delayed, was back in school and doing well. She wrote that his mother had testified in a separate policy hearing about why emergency access rules are not decoration. And she wrote one line I copied into my own notebook. People forget that seconds are made of people. I have carried that line with me ever since. We live in a world where power loves to call itself efficiency, charm, tradition, inconvenience, misunderstanding. It changes its clothes often. My father taught me to listen for something simpler: who had to wait, who had to bend, who had to pay, who had to swallow insult to keep the lights on. If you answer those questions honestly, most cases become clear. That day in Bellhaven was never really about a Porsche or a scarf or a famous last name, though all of those things were part of the picture. It was about what we owe each other in the plainest terms. Stop when you have caused harm. Tell the truth while it is still hard. Do not mock the person you have wounded. Do not use money, office, or polish to shrink another human being. And never treat a public court like a stage built for your comfort, because the bench is not there to flatter anybody. My father also told me something when I was very young and still following him around his office, pretending law books were mysterious treasure chests. He said, "The courtroom is the last place on earth where every soul must enter the same height." I did not fully understand him then. I do now. In that room, titles fall away if the judge is doing her job, or at least they should. Otherwise, the robe is just cloth and the gavel is just noise. So if you take anything from this story, let it be this. Dignity is not a luxury good. It does not belong more to the rich than to the tired. Accountability is not cruelty. It is simply the price of living among other people without becoming dangerous to them. And justice, when it is real, is quiet enough to hear the small things that powerful people count on us to ignore. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end of this one. I do not forget the people who listen with their whole heart. If this story meant something to you, stay close, because the next one I carry is about a man who thought a courtroom could be bought with a handshake and found out too late that some doors only open for the truth. Until then, remember this: the law hears the laugh.